between Twyford and Henley-on-Thames. For more travel news, go to gbnews.com.
Crash Law 24 sponsors GB News Traffic and Travel Report.
It's the final week to see how you could be our biggest winner yet, touring in this stylish Elnag Baron 560 motorhome. This brand new 2025 model comes complete with kitchen and bathroom areas and enough space to comfortably sleep a family of 4. We'll also give you a further £5,000 in tax-free cash to add a few of your favourite things. Don't miss out as lines close on the 6th of June. For another chance to win the lot, text WIN to 63225. One entry costs £2.50 plus one standard network rate message, or text BONUS to 63225. 5 entries cost £5 plus one standard network rate message. Go to gbnews.com/win. Entries start at £2.50. Call 0903 686 3232. Calls cost £2.50 plus your network access charge. Or post your name and number to GB13 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 4 p.m. on the 6th of June. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand. Good luck.
Westminster's full of talk, but out here, it's the real world.
Am I allowed to talk now?
No, that's it. This is where it matters, real people and real lives. That's what politics is all about.
In fact, has Trump made a good start? No.
Straight answers, no spin, and just a couple of pints.
How many fingers have I got up?
About 10. So join me for Lee Anderson's Real World every Friday at 7 p.m, only on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
It's Patrick Christie's Tonight, and here we do things differently.
It's explaining the absolute madness of this, doesn't it?
It's explosive.
I mean, this is very good.
It's lively.
850. Your government sat there, Sean, and it did nothing.
It's controversial.
And the Middle East has been in turmoil since before I was born.
It's everything you need to kickstart your evening.
Everyone's had their Weetabix tonight. I love to see it.
That's Patrick Christie's Tonight, weeknights from 9 p.m. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Good evening. So, Trump brings back steel tariffs to 50% with one exception, the United Kingdom. Are we now in a really rather good position? My colleague Sarah Pochin today in Parliament talked about banning the burqa. Is it time for a full national debate, especially given how many other countries in the world have? And we hear that France, having now received £800 million of our money since 2014, are actually going to intercept the small boats. Do we believe them? We'll debate all of that and more. But first, let's get the news with Sophia Hill.
Nigel, thank you. A very good evening. It's just gone 7 o'clock. Let's bring you up to speed on all the latest headlines. Vladimir Putin has told President Trump Russia will have to respond to the recent attacks. This comes as the US president shared that he had spoken to Mr. Putin this afternoon, discussing Ukrainian drone strikes on Russia and tensions with Iran. On Truth Social, Mr. Trump said it was a good conversation, but not one that would lead to immediate peace. This comes as Defence Secretary John Healey has announced that Britain delivered 10,000 drones to Ukraine last year and plans to send 10 times that number in 2025. Speaking earlier this afternoon in Brussels, Healey said that the UK will boost training for Ukrainian forces by 20%, raising funding to nearly £250 million. Now, the Chancellor has confirmed changes to the winter fuel allowance, saying more people will qualify this winter. Rachel Reeves made the announcement following a speech in Manchester where she unveiled £15.6 billion for transport projects outside London. She gave no detail on who will benefit from the allowance changes, but the move does follow the backlash over the cuts made by Labour just weeks after taking office. Meanwhile, the Chancellor seems to be brushing off warnings from top police chiefs that the funding cuts could force them to choose which crimes they can afford to investigate. The head of the Met Police, Sir Mark Rowley, and other regional counterparts have written to the Prime Minister, warning that cuts have far-reaching consequences and will lead to reductions in frontline policing last seen under austerity. Rachel Reeves says it's not a decision she recognises and that the government will announce increased spending on police. The Home Office is just one of several departments yet to reach an agreement with the Treasury over departmental funding ahead of next week's spending review. And Queen Camilla has revealed her wish to become joint patron of one of her favourite places, the Garden Museum in South London. Speaking during a visit for British Flowers Week, she told attendees she's discussed joining her husband, King Charles, who is already patron. The announcement was met with cheers, particularly with the Garden Museum president, Alan Titchmarsh.
As president of the Garden Museum, I should be following this up with a letter and a strong invitation, hoping not to tread on His Majesty's toes. But I think he'll be delighted that Her Majesty is every bit as keen a gardener as I know she is, as he is.
Those are the latest GB News headlines for now. More from me in an hour, but now it's back to Nigel.
For the very latest GB News direct to your smartphone, sign up to News Alerts by scanning the QR code or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
We're going to start this evening talking all things America. To begin with, President Trump announces tariffs, tariffs, tariffs. Yes, steel and steel products from all over the world will go up in the next few weeks to 50%. There is but one exception, and that's the United Kingdom. And those tariffs will stay at 25%, or maybe even less if we carry on with our trade negotiations. The funny thing about that was, in the House of Commons today, we had Keir Starmer saying what a great position we were in, without ever mentioning the fact that without Brexit we couldn't be there. And somehow the Conservatives appeared to be attacking the position. It all seemed very, very odd. But we also had Karen Leavitt, the press spokesman of the White House, yesterday saying this about the BBC.
We don't take the word of Hamas with total truth. We like to look into it when they speak. Unlike the BBC, who had multiple headlines. They wrote, Israeli tank kills 26, Israeli tank kills 21, Israeli gunfire kills 31, Red Cross says 21 people were killed in an aid incident, and then, oh wait, they had to correct and take down their entire story, saying we reviewed the footage and couldn't find any evidence of anything. Oh. Okay, so we're going to look into reports before we confirm them from this podium or before we take action, and I suggest that journalists who actually care about truth do the same.
And we also had Elon Musk. Now, I have some experience of this. Musk can love you, but often not for very long and turn against you. And then we saw this last night. I'm sorry, I just can't stand it anymore. This massive, outrageous, pork-filled congressional spending bill is a disgusting abomination. Shame on those of you who voted for it. You know you did wrong. You know it. Well, joining me down the line to discuss all of this is a very good friend of mine, Jason Miller, Donald Trump's former communications strategist. And Jason, there's a lot of stuff to unpack here. I mean, there really is. It's quite difficult to follow what Trump's doing on tariffs, to be honest, but it does genuinely seem that the United Kingdom, because of Brexit, is in a relatively privileged position.
Yeah, Nigel, you're exactly right. And I think the fact that the UK came to the table and President Trump recognized that, was able to put together a trade deal very quickly. And now, actually, I think both countries will be in a much better position. And it's something that really goes to where we can strengthen the bond between the two countries. And I tell you, Nigel, the way that the EU has approached this has been completely wrong. They've done it completely backwards. And I think so much of that is because it's these bureaucrats, the technocrats who are in Brussels, as you would know, if anyone who I could talk to on this entire planet knows about the bureaucrats and technocrats in the EU and Brussels, it'd be you. I think they're trying to dig in and really trying to cause a fight, and I think that's going to ultimately not work out very well for the EU.
And is there a chance that over the course of the next few weeks that the UK and America can negotiate something better than where we are?
Well, I do think as you start to put the fine print on all these things, obviously both sides are probably going to have a couple of little tweaks and changes. So I could see this become an even better deal, so to speak, for both sides. But I wouldn't want to get ahead of U.S. Trade Rep Ambassador Jameson Greer on that, or Scott Bessent, the Secretary of the Treasury.
Sure. Sure, understood. Now, the BBC, Donald Trump in the past has been critical of the BBC. And it was interesting to see his press spokesman yesterday having a real go. I have to say, I think Trump's got a fair point here about the BBC, hasn't he?
Well, he really does, and I think just from my perspective, when you look at the BBC, I think it probably stands for the BS Broadcasting Corporation. I'm not sure what the actual letters are supposed to be, but hopefully Ofcom doesn't come and smack me down for even saying that. But look, when you go out there and deliver news that is so biased, and when it's not even news, when so much of it is made up or it's fake, then I think that's really bad out there for people who are legitimate journalists, for people who do want to present the truth, who want to report on what's going on. But you can't be a reporter and be a political commentator at the exact same time. It's one or the other. Either you're trying to deliver the news or you're trying to make the news and shape it. And I don't think you can do both.
There have been one or two BBC backtracks in recent times on things that have been said. Although, to be fair to the BBC, sometimes it's tough to know exactly what the truth is in a place like Gaza. Now, Elon Musk, we've got to talk Elon Musk while you're with us, Jason. I mean, look, he came into the campaign. There's no doubt in my mind he did a huge amount of work in helping to get Trump elected, a huge amount of work in frankly, making the Trump campaign look cool, reaching out to young people. But as I found myself, after a sort of fairly brief friendship, he seems to turn on people. And this last night was a pretty vicious attack on the president, wasn't it?
Yeah, and I'm not happy about it at all. Obviously, I'm a loyal supporter of President Trump's, and while I'm very appreciative for everything that Elon Musk has done up until this point, here's what people in the UK need to realize is right now, this bill, this big, beautiful bill, this reconciliation budget package, which is a whole bunch of jargon that nobody in the UK should fully have committed to memory, this is still going through the Senate, the upper chamber for us, where the details are being finalized. And if Elon wanted to go in there and say, I want to try to get my EV tax credit reinserted or some other provision, then he still has that ability to do so. But you can't be a part of the team and then turn and start attacking the president in such a direct personal matter, and still then expect for everybody to say that you're their friend. And so I think this was the complete wrong way for Elon to go about doing it. Because what he's made it very personal. And this should not be something where you're going directly after President Trump on. I mean, in our Constitution, it is the Congress that writes these bills. If the president and Russ Vogt, the budget director, could write it and say, we're just going to sign it into law, then they would. But that's not how it works here. But again, I think Elon shouldn't be attacking the president this directly, and I think they'll probably impact their friendship.
So do I. Jason Miller, absolute pleasure to have you on the programme. Thank you very much indeed. Jason Miller there, former senior advisor to President Trump and a great friend of mine and this channel. I'm joined by Kwasi Kwarteng, former Conservative MP and Chancellor, and Lloyd Russell-Moyle, former Labour MP. So there he is, Lloyd, the Prime Minister. The UK's in a better position than anybody else in the rest of the world. There is an irony in a Prime Minister who wanted to overturn Brexit benefiting from it.
Well, he thought at the time that we would have been better in the EU, and if we'd been in the EU, maybe he would have persuaded the EU to take a different kind of tack.
Oh, come off.
But now we are out. Yeah. You have to make the best of the benefits that you get. We've lost some things out of being out, but you do get some other corollary benefits. And I think Keir has done a pretty good job here, because it's not about overall tariff numbers, actually. That's pretty irrelevant. It's about the differential. It's about the differential between the tariffs in other countries relative to what you've got. Yeah. And if we've got the lowest relative to the rest of the world, and that might go down, what you will see is American companies saying, well, actually, UK is in a perfect position because you've got to deal with Europe for trade. You've got to deal with other countries, Japan and everything else for trade. But you also have these low trade tariffs that we can... And companies don't automatically hate tariffs. What they want is certainty. And if the tariff is moderate and fair, and if it's certain that it's not going to suddenly go up and down because we've got a good deal,
it's good for
business will want to relocate it. So actually, I think Labour's really done very well on this, and this might be one of the saving graces for Labour if it starts to play out in jobs.
Well, I think that Starmer is doing far better on the world stage than he is domestically.
Definitely. But actually, what he could have done, Nigel, is say, as a Remainer, I have to accept that Brexit... He can't do it. But they can't do it. No. He cannot bring himself. No. And even, Remainer friends of mine, they can't bring themselves to say what is obvious to a 10-year-old, a 12-year-old, whatever, that the fact that we're out of the EU means that we can negotiate our own deal.
Because the fight around Brexit was not really about the economy. It was about democracy and identity.
Well, it was part of it. It was part of it.
The main motivation for most Remainers was really an identity thing, and for most Leavers, because they wanted to take back control. And I think that's fair.
Lloyd, forget about the theology and the history. Look at the present, OK? And all he had to say was, Brexit has enabled us to do X, Y and Z, which we couldn't do before.
He doesn't have to say it at all.
No, he could say it.
I just thought sitting there it was pretty ironic. Very keen to know, folks, what you think at home. You know, is the UK now in a good, strong position? Farage at GBNews.com. Let me know your views. Now, moving on to the BBC. I was trying to be fair in some ways to the BBC, that knowing what's true and what's not in Gaza, where there is no proper reporting, you know, and obviously Hamas do put their side of the story. But there's been a growing feeling that the BBC are prepared to believe the worst of Israel.
Well, that's because the Israeli government have been shown repeatedly to make up stories and lies almost in equal measure to Hamas. And I think you're quite right that at the moment both sides are complete propagandists and they say their lies, and it is difficult to get through to the truth. But I think overall the BBC has told a relatively balanced story. If you ask people like Gary Lineker, they'll say that the BBC went too far supporting Israel and not criticising what's happening enough. So I do think it gets attacked from both sides.
Yeah, that I get.
And in reality, the BBC has been pretty fair in showing that this atrocity is happening, that Israel is now committing almost certain genocide, and it's
genocide,
sickening, despite the awful thing that happened
genocide,
to
Lloyd,
Israel.
I don't think that's the right word.
Well, that is the word that's legally being used now.
The Prime Minister will not accept the word genocide.
No, but the International Criminal Court...
who cares what they think?
Well, they're the international courts. But let's just say war crimes then, because to some extent the punishment for both is equal.
Well, you've been very clever.
Quasi, hang on. October the 7th was a war crime.
It was.
And that there's no doubt.
That's right. And he's been very clever at not addressing the actual situation, the actual question. What Caroline Levitt, or Catherine Levitt, I can't remember her first name, but she's a very good press spokesman for Donald Trump, and she questioned BBC bias. And if the question is there bias in the BBC?
Yeah.
I would say, of course there is. Yeah. Even Andrew Marr said, we are progressive, and we make no bones about that. And that's the thing that should be addressed.
But towards Israel very often, not against it.
But, you know, and I think in that particular instance where, and I've never heard anything like it, where you put a news story and then you have to take it down and say, well, actually, we haven't had this confirmed. The whole point about being a journalist is that you confirm the stories before you publish them.
Yeah, and
this is an embarrassment.
There is this example of a story that the BBC covered where they talked about a massacre that had happened. It actually turned out that, in fact, this was 4.5 kilometres away from where the BBC reported. Look, as I say, you know, it's difficult in war zones. I think, Lloyd, I have to say, I think the point that Kwasi makes is that very often on issues, the BBC are biased without even knowing they're biased.
It's true.
The BBC's job...
They've got an inbuilt bias.
The BBC...
That's the issue.
I'll agree with you, but the bias is to represent the state and the status quo of mainstream British institutional opinion. Not centre-left, institutional opinion. Now, your view is the institutions of the state are centre-left.
Yeah,
my view is the institutions are centre-right. And my suggestion is it probably means both of us are on either side.
Depends where you stand on the spectrum. I think that's a fair point.
Yeah.
But there is an institutional... And it's not just institutional, it's a cultural bias towards certain progressive, as Andrew Marr himself said.
I don't think it's progressive.
It's partly who the BBC employs, where it's located. I mean, that's a lot of it. I often think they're biased without knowing they are. Now, in response to that little debate, a BBC spokesperson, couldn't be spokesman, could it, said, the claim the BBC took down a story after reviewing footage is completely wrong. We did not remove any story and we stand by our journalism. Our news stories and headlines about Sunday's aid distribution centre incident were updated throughout the day and always clearly attributed. This is totally normal practice on any fast-moving news story. So there you are. Now, before we end this segment, Elon Musk, I mean, he's an extraordinary figure.
He is.
He's an heroic figure in many ways. I mean, his space missions... were achieved in a fraction of the time, for a fraction of the price that NASA could do.
But I'm afraid he does behave like a spoiled child in many ways. You know, if he doesn't get his way, if people don't agree with him, he throws his toys out of the pram and says, I mean, what he said was a disgusting abomination. I mean, obviously it's coloured language, but I think at the same time he is intolerant of any kind of dissent or divergence of view.
I found that. In my relationship with him. It raises quite a big question. You know, is it valuable, or could it be valuable, for big, powerful figures from outside the political world to get involved in politics, or is it always going to end badly?
Look, I have not much time for Elon's views. I don't agree with almost anything that he says. But to defend him slightly, I do think that we are in danger in politics of getting too bland of people, because everyone feels like they have to talk and behave and walk in the same way. Not everyone should be good at everything. And sometimes you want disruptors to come in. I want disruptors in a different direction. But you need disruptors to come in, and they should be awkward fits. You know, just like the cow needs that grit in the stomach to actually digest the grass.
You're a biology expert.
You need the grit in the system sometimes to get it working properly. And I think that was what his role was meant to be. It was always short-term, and then he was out. I think, actually, the bigger problem that he has is he's shown his hand now, and a lot of the people who bought his products, particularly Tesla, are revolted by his reviews, revolted by what he's actually pushed forward, because that's not the values basis that he sold his cars on previously. And I suspect he's damaged his business.
Well, he's damaged his business, and he's not going back to the White House any time soon. I cannot see, with Donald Trump having given him such unique access to the inside, this being forgiven.
But I think Lloyd is right. I think it was always going to be a short-term stint.
Yeah, it's just a very bad way to end.
Yeah,
and Donald Trump's got relatively thin skin when it comes to personal attacks.
Well, he does forgive people, but this will take some time. He does. I mean, in a moment, we discuss the new debate that's been sparked by my new fellow MP, Sarah Pochin. Should we debate banning the burqa?
Hi, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and my show is your opportunity to cut through all the noise and dive in headfirst to some robust debates. Ideas clash.
Situation,
Because you're deliberately avoiding my point. Nothing's held back.
And if you think this is the end of it, wait for more.
And we do not shy away from the difficult stuff. Sometimes I want to shake people and say, if only you understood. So join me on Dubes & Co. weeknights at 6 p.m, only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
GB News Breakfast, every day from 6 a.m.
Let's go to our man Adam Cherry, who's at Waterloo Station this morning, to tell us more about this. Are you thinking of changing jobs, Adam?
Well, to become a train driver, I think, I don't know, I don't think I'll be very good at it. But nonetheless, those who might be are the 18-year-olds who are, the 18-year-olds who are now eligible. They have permission to start the training. I mean, the argument is that the average age of a train driver at the moment is, I think, about 40, try and get my words out here, 48 years old. And, you know, several thousands of them are coming up for retirement in the next few years. And so reducing the age from 20 to 18 is going to help stop all those last-minute cancellations that bug so many of us on our work commutes throughout the week, and try and put some slack in the system. Of course, at the moment, if it's 20, people are making decisions for their careers at the age of 18 anyway, so lots of them are just sort of missing the opportunity. Heidi Alexander, the Transport Secretary, says it's basically about future-proofing the transport network, and it's a pretty effective and easy way to do it. It has overwhelming support within DFT, within Department of Transport and industry leaders. I'll just read you a quick quote from Mick Whelan, who is the General Secretary of ASLEF, which is the Train Drivers Union. At the moment, young people who want to become train drivers leave school at 18, get other jobs, as I was saying, and miss out on an industry. Miss out as the industry doesn't wait around until they turn 20 to find a career. So hopefully it'll stop all those last-minute cancellations which annoy everyone so much.
Thanks, Adam. Appreciate it. Looks a nice day where he is there.
Yeah, looks lovely, doesn't it? I think it is cold, though.
GB News, the People's Channel.
Good Afternoon Britain isn't just about us. The wonderful thing about this programme is it's about everyone watching. It's an interactive programme.
Well, there absolutely is something to see here, and we're going to be talking about it more. Whether it's breaking royal news, please bring us up to date, or indeed a particularly punchy speech in the House of Commons.
Very, very curious.
We bring it to you live, and then we bring you live reaction as well.
That's Good Afternoon Britain, weekdays from midday.
Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Some of your reactions at home to this debate about tariffs and the position the UK finds itself in. John says, why are we getting all giddy about tariffs on steel exports to the USA? According to the left, we don't make any. Well, the truth is, we make very little primary steel, but we still have steel fabricators in our country that make very high-end products used in construction. So our steel exports to the USA are about £400 to £500 million a year. It may not be enormous, but I tell you what, to those specialist companies, it matters a hell of a lot. Lindsay says, how long did it take the BBC to call Hamas terrorists? Are they actually doing so now? I've no idea. However, who remembers when Hamas's rocket failed and hit a hospital? What did the BBC do? They accused Israel and then had to backtrack. You are, Lindsay, 100% right, because that did happen very early on in the conflict. Now, my new parliamentary colleague in Reform UK for Runcorn and Helsby, Sarah Pochin, had her first Prime Minister's question today, and this really surprised the House of Commons.
Given the Prime Minister's desire to strengthen strategic alignment with our European neighbours, will he, in the interests of public safety, follow the lead of France, Denmark, Belgium and others and ban the burqa?
Yeah. Prime Minister.
Can I welcome her to her place? But I'm not going to follow her down that line. But now she is here and safely in her place, perhaps she could tell her new party leader that his latest plan to bet £80 billion of unfunded tax cuts, he's no idea how he's going to pay for it, is Liz Truss all over again. Although, considering I think she was a Conservative member when Liz Truss was leader, she probably won't.
Well, ignore the bit about me, because I am just the whipping boy in every... I was even called by a Conservative MP a socialist. I mean, I just sit there, it's giddy a minute stuff. And the poor old Prime Minister, who mentioned my name 16 times in one speech last week, dear, dear, dear. But let's get back to what Sarah Pochin is talking about. I think this debate actually goes beyond the burqa, and she listed some European countries there, but I'm going to add to that. Cameroon, Chad, the Republic of Congo, Gabon, Tunisia. In Asia, China, Sri Lanka, Turkmenistan, Uzbekistan. There are many, many, many countries in the world that are banning the burqa. But I think it goes further than that. You see, Sarah said, in the interest of public safety. I was in Aberdeen on Monday. There was a mob there to meet me, an organisation called Antifa, and half of them had complete face coverings on, so they would be unidentifiable. I don't think face coverings in public places make sense, and I think we do deserve a debate about that, of which I see the burqa as being a part. Kwasi, what do you make of that? I mean, this is a necessary debate, isn't it?
It is. We've got to have a debate. I mean, I was very struck this morning. I was on the school run, and I saw a school-age child, she must have been about 15 or 16, in a burqa. And I do have problems for children, essentially going to a school where... and she was wearing a uniform. She was wearing a school uniform, but she was wearing a burqa on top of the uniform, which didn't make sense to me at all. And it doesn't make sense, I think, you know, when you're going to school, when you're doing communal activities, to have that sort of face covering. That's my view. I think there's a broader issue in terms of people wearing burqas when they're going out shopping. I think that's slightly more difficult, adults. But having school kids in that uniform, that religious signification, I think, is difficult.
It's a tough one, this, Lloyd. It's a very difficult debate, but it's a debate, as I said, I've mentioned all the countries around the world that have had this debate and decided to ban it. It is... the Quran does not say anything about wearing a burqa. It does say they want women to dress modestly. And actually, if you go to Morocco or Egypt or the UAE, you won't see, Muslim countries, you won't see a single woman in a burqa. It's a relatively new thing. How do you feel about it?
Well, I come from it from a libertarian point of view, as I do with most social issues. I think people should be able to wear as much or as little as they want. But of course, in society, we do put some limits on that. We put some limits on the little, as little as you need.
Exactly. You can't walk around naked.
I mean, we do allow people to walk around naked in certain spaces.
In certain spaces. We're not do that in Trafalgar Square.
Not at GBNews, no. I can assure you.
And we allow it for the naked bike ride and things like this. So there are events as well that we allow. But broadly, we say it's not appropriate. And so I think it is OK to say that there are certain frameworks that you have to do. And if we say in society we want to see your face broadly in most circumstances, these are the circumstances we have to do it. But I do feel very uncomfortable if we're suddenly saying it's about banning the burqa as opposed to the face mask.
Which is why I've widened this out.
I know, but the difficulty is, as soon as you have some exceptions. So do you allow a veil? Do you allow in a cold day someone to wear a balaclava? Because, you know, there's really, particularly in the kind of the north of Scotland, you get really bitterly cold days sometimes where you do have to cover your face. So it becomes more difficult when you're then suddenly saying, well, on these circumstances, yes, but on these circumstances, no.
Yes,
so broadly, I think we shouldn't ban things. I think sometimes you can provide guidelines. I'm not in favour of making things criminal. I don't think we should lock people up for doing these things. But I do think there are ways that you can encourage, distill, require, for example, access of services. You can say if you want to access this service, you have to be able to doing this. But if you're walking down the street with your mate, then to some extent...
There is another social point. I think people do feel uncomfortable, actually, around people whose faces are covered, and I think it's a very difficult thing. Certainly, I think mass protesters who can turn up and demonstrate and, in some cases, use violence should not be able to get away with it.
But sometimes there is also, in certain situations, moments where you might want to not have yourself identified. It might well be on a picket line. You don't want the employer to be able to look and say...
Actually, no,
I don't agree with that.
I totally agree with that.
Because what you don't necessarily want is people to then be persecuted because they went
but the problem with people cover their faces not because they're worried about being persecuted. They generally cover their faces because they don't want to be identified doing bad things.
I get that, but the danger is, as soon as you make the rule for that group of people, you have a consequence.
And then you've got somebody wrapping a scarf around their face on a cold morning. I do understand that, Lloyd.
You have to be very careful.
But I tell you what, I think that question today has sparked a debate that will become quite a...
I think it's a relevant debate.
It is a relevant debate. In a moment, another relevant debate. The French, our friends who, of course, do their utmost to stop the small boats, or do they? They're promising us now that they will intercept the boats at sea up to 300 metres from the shore. Do we believe them? All of that after the break.
Can't wait to get in that sea.
Lovely and warm.
Just like the feeling of having great travel insurance.
All Clear Travel Insurance sponsors GB News Travel Destinations Forecast.
Severe thunderstorms are set to continue across parts of Europe, bringing large hail and some frequent lightning, but elsewhere plenty of sunshine with temperatures on the up. And that's the same for Madeira, across the Canary Islands, and most of Portugal and Spain should see plenty of warm sunshine. But it's really across southern parts of France, southern parts of Germany, northern Italy where there's a risk of severe thunderstorms. But elsewhere across central and eastern parts of the Mediterranean, plenty of sunshine and temperatures up day by day, which means it's going to feel very warm in that sunshine too.
All Clear Travel Insurance sponsors GB News Travel Destinations Forecast.
Hello there, good evening. Welcome to your GB News weather update from the Met Office. As we head into tomorrow, it's going to be quite a wet start for many areas, turning a little brighter into the afternoon, though we can't rule out a risk of some blustery showers. The reason for all the unsettled weather? Well, it's all thanks to low pressure situated to the north and at times this evening dragging in longer spells of rain across from the southwest. For a time, any showers easing away this evening, but soon being replaced by further outbreaks of rain, all moving through from the west, leading to a very wet start across Northern Ireland, most of England and Wales, but a few more clearer skies across parts of Scotland. Away from the northwest though, plenty of showers moving through here, but with all the cloud and rain it's set to be a rather mild start to Thursday. But for the morning commute, it is going to be fairly wet. Now, winds should be quite light, though we could still see some quite heavy outbreaks of rain, particularly across any high ground as this area of rain sweeps its way eastwards, eventually clearing the far east of Northern Ireland, but then pushing back into northern parts of England. A little drier and brighter across parts of Scotland, but still plenty of showers across the northwest. The odd one or two heavy, and it could still be quite breezy around exposed coasts of Scotland. And Thursday is set to be quite an unsettled day. Outbreaks of rain shifting their way eastwards, still rather heavy at times. Brightening up a little more into the afternoon, but still once again a risk of showers. Still breezy around coastal areas, and the odd shower turning quite heavy, may even hit the odd rumble of thunder. And still once again plenty of showers skirting the way across Scotland, where it will feel a little fresher, but elsewhere temperatures remaining in the mid to high teens. Friday once again brings more unsettled weather, showers, longer spells of rain and still quite breezy, particularly across the southwest, or where we see any heavier outbreaks of rain, but potentially once again turning a little brighter for England and Wales as we head into the afternoon. Further spells of rain on Saturday, though a drier day ahead on Sunday with temperatures remaining fairly similar.
Mornings don't have to be tiresome, especially if you have the right company.
Wake up to news as it happens, opinion and debate, and of course, a little bit of entertainment too.
Because when the kettle's on, we're on.
That's Breakfast on GB News, a show worth waking up for.
Every morning from 6 a.m.
Only on the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
We'll spread the news, you spread the word.
From the school run to the home run, watch a new show for all of Britain.
So he can say whatever he wants.
A straight-talking show where all voices are heard.
And, you know, when are we going to stop talking about smashing the gangs and actually do it?
With the stories that matter from every part of our country.
There's a bit of a crash landing there for your Chancellor.
Bold, fearless and standing up for you. That's me, Martin Daubney, 3 p.m. till 6 p.m, weekdays, here only on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
At 9 o'clock here on GB News, it's the Patrick Christys Show. And the star of the show, Patrick, joins me now. Patrick, what have you got for the viewers this evening?
Nigel, firstly, absolute pleasure to have you back. Smashing stuff. But yeah, loads on this evening. I mean, Rachel Reeves, she's going to put your taxes up. We all know it. She's not saying it, but we all know it. She has to. Have you ever seen a more incoherent Chancellor than this? She can't even talk in full sentences anymore. I've got to say, Rachel Reeves takedown at 9. Later on that hour, we're going live to Portugal. Charlie Peters, our reporter on the ground there in the search room. Maddie McCann has got a big exclusive for us from a man who thinks the police are simply searching in the wrong place. He's going to tell them where he thinks they need to go. Also, all of this talk about banning the burqa, well, slightly irrelevant, really, because if the latest demographic stats are anything to go by, Britain could well be a Muslim country very, very soon. All that and much more, Nigel.
OK, Patrick, thank you very much indeed. Issues that we're touching on as well, maybe in slightly different way, but we're touching on as well. So, back in 23, Rishi Sunak promised another £467 million to give to the French to stop the boats coming. That followed on from all the monies we'd given since 2014. It's an incredible £800 million we've given to the French. Now, they do stop some boats. In percentage terms, they stop 30-40% of the boats from crossing, but so what? Because the same people come back the very next day. Now, I think because there's an Anglo-French summit on July the 8th, and there's huge anger about the French copper literally photographing the migrant dinghies leaving the beach last Saturday, they say they will take action as promised, and they will stop boats anywhere up to 300 metres from their launch position and bring them back to shore. Are we confident that they'll do this, Kwasi?
Well, when I heard 300 metres, I have to say it's not very far. I mean, if you think how big the channel is, I mean, it's 20, 25 miles at its shortest, probably. So 300 metres isn't that far out, but it's better than nothing. Okay, it's
if they do it.
If they do it. And as you say, we've been pumping these guys with cash for more than 10 years. I mean, it's nearly £1 billion over 10 years, which is a lot of money.
Yeah, I mean, the anger, I think, Lloyd, the anger of that photograph of the copper taking a picture, that made people very, very, very angry.
Yes, it feels like the last set of previous governments that we've had and I say that plurally, has thrown money to the French but hasn't really demanded outcomes. Now, if we see a change here, Yvette Cooper is a bit stronger, I think. She's not going to let this go, and she's saying, if you want to keep getting this money, you need to be showing outcomes, then that is positive. But I do think the big prize here is that we need a proper processing centre in France, have a proper legal route to do it via France, and anyone that arrives in Britain, you say, oh, of course, come on our boat, come on our little bus, we'll take you to our processing centre. It's just a quick drive across the channel. Oh, and you're at the back of the queue now because you came over on the boats. That's what we should do. That's what would stop it overnight. And that's what we should offer. And the Mayor of Calais has said that they are willing to talk about that now because they've got so fed up with it as well.
Well, talking about that, who is accepted and who's not, I'm joined in the studio by Amar Yohal, former government lawyer, on this very issue, because the one thing the newspapers keep reporting on that makes people jolly angry is that about 1 in 3 of those who claim asylum are granted asylum under what are called exceptional circumstances. And you know the stories that have driven people absolutely potty. You know, for example, a Pakistani man jailed for child sex offences, but he couldn't be deported because there were exceptional circumstances in that this would be unduly harsh on his children, and there was a chicken nuggets case. What's really going on here? It's all to do with Article 8, isn't it, of the ECHR?
Exactly. So thank you for having me on. So Article 8 of the European Convention on Human Rights guarantees you a right to private and family life. And so in circumstances where you'd otherwise not have a right to remain in the UK, you can apply to remain based on your Article 8 rights, and that is applied based on Home Office guidance and rules if it cause undue hardship to yourself, your family, so your children, or your partner.
What about the undue hardship some of these people inflict upon British people?
Well, exactly. And so this is supposed to be applied in exceptional circumstances. It's become far from exceptional, and even where... So this is...
But it's now 1/3 of cases.
Exactly.
That isn't exceptional.
No, it's not.
I mean, exceptional might be 1%,
but
might be 2%, but not 30%.
No, exactly. And that's what's driven the government to seek to clarify the framework where Article 8 is applied. I don't think that will make much of a difference, because the reason it's in the immigration guidance is Theresa May tried that same idea back in 2012. And so the courts have a very different idea from the Home Office about how these rights should be applied.
We had last night on the programme a former Chief Immigration Minister, officer from Calais, British officer in Calais. He said one of the points about the ECHR is that, you know, even if it appears to be a breach of the treaty, even if there's been a judgment in Strasbourg, that many other European countries simply ignore it. Is that true?
Yes, I think that's largely true. I think we, partly because of our legal setup, partly just because of English culture, we dot the I's, we cross the T's. We apply the ECHR in an expansive way, partly by operation of the Human Rights Act, which a lot of European countries don't. That doesn't mean that Italy doesn't have its ECHR issues with its own border.
I mean, Lloyd, you know, this... You can see, you may not agree with, you know, I've always argued we should leave the ECHR, and you haven't agreed with that, but you can see why exceptional circumstances applying to 1/3 of cases, something's very wrong, isn't it?
Well, a lot of these problems are British judges ruling it in an expansive way.
That's a fair point.
And sometimes the difficulty is the government makes a judgment. It is not worth appealing it all the way through the courts up, because it will end up costing more. But actually what we need is the government to push some of these cases even a bit further, so that we get some more definitive judgments that say this is probably out of step. And you usually find, or I have found, that more junior judges do tend to go for the more liberal interpretation of it. And when you get those arguments at the more senior courts, you can make those arguments about community balance and safety, because Article 8 is not an absolute right. It is one that can be balanced, and other countries do balance it better.
But I think,
so
Lloyd,
I do think and if it requires some primary legislation that says on immigration matters, of course you can consider this, but it needs to be considered on the round. I suspect the European courts would not rule that down, and that would then stand.
So
but
look,
we do need some movement on this.
I think Lloyd is right. I think a lot of this is to do with judges and how they interpret the law.
The British judges, not European British judges.
I agree with that. It's an art, not a science. And if you've got British judges who are giving an expansive or liberal interpretation of the law, these are the kinds of problems you're going to get. But to say that exceptional applies to 1/3 of cases is a nonsense.
it is final thought on all of this. I mean, you know, what Lloyd says is right. It seems to me that all the while the ECHR is there, written into British law through the Human Rights Act, that our judiciary will interpret it generally in an expansive and liberal way. I mean, is our legal profession woke? Are our judges woke? Am I asking you an unfair question?
I mean, I want to say 100% the legal profession is woke. I think judges, as Lloyd's correctly pointed out, are put into a difficult position where there's huge backlogs in the courts. By the time these cases even get to the immigration tribunals, they've lengthened the time the claimants have been in the UK, so they have a stronger claim to having a life in the UK. And then, as you say, there's Strasbourg jurisprudence, which they have to follow, which is not helpful. So, look, I think the judiciary has been encouraged into mission creep, but I wouldn't say it's woke per se. You know, I think they're in a tough
but when I hate to go back to this boring point, but when you've got exceptional stretching to a third of cases, something isn't working.
Something isn't working. The whole thing stinks, frankly, doesn't it? Thank you ever so much for joining us on the programme. Sorry I put you on the spot there a bit at the end. In a moment, a university report that is out that says that white Brits will be a minority by 2040. Well, they already are in London and Birmingham. Is that something that should worry us? We debate that after the break.
In the GB newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens.
With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK,
we're ready to keep you up to date with what's happening every half an hour, every single day. Bulletins here on GB News,
the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
Welcome back to Britain's Newsroom with Andrew and Beth.
Hello everyone, Patrick Christie is here.
I'm Michelle Duke, Britain's News Channel.
News channel.
Access the stories that matter to you. Take the GB News family with you on any device. And as long as you have an internet connection, tune in to GB News anywhere on the planet or beyond. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
From the school run to the home run, watch a new show for all of Britain.
So he can say whatever he wants.
A straight-talking show where all voices are heard.
And, you know, when are we going to stop talking about smashing the gangs and actually do it?
With the stories that matter from every part of our country.
There's a bit of a crash landing there for your Chancellor.
Bold, fearless and standing up for you. That's me, Martin Daubney, 3 p.m. till 6 p.m, weekdays, here only on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Westminster's full of talk, but out here, it's the real world.
Am I allowed to talk then?
No, that's it. This is where it matters, real people and real lives. That's what politics is all about.
The fact is Trump made a good start, no.
Straight answers, no spin, and just a couple of pints.
How many fingers have I got up?
About 10. So join me for Lee Anderson's Real World every Friday at 7 p.m, only on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Exciting news. Every Friday, my Patrick Christie's Tonight Show is going to have a twist to it. We're welcoming some special guests. You. That's right, on Fridays I'm going to be doing my show in front of a live studio audience because this show is about you and what you have to say. It's going to be the same big debates, same big topics, same big opinions. But every Friday night at 9 p.m, you are invited to come on down to Patrick Christie's Tonight to be a part of the action. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
We're proud to be GB News, the People's Channel. And as you know, we always love to hear your views. Now, there's a new way of getting in touch with us at gbnews.com/yoursay. By commenting, you can be part of a live conversation and join our GB News community. You can even talk to me, Bev Turner, or any of the members of the GB News family.
This is Britain's Newsroom, where your voice matters.
It's just astonishing. With expert analysis and honest opinion, we don't just keep you informed.
We bring you unique perspectives you won't see anywhere else.
Can't argue with any of that. When the news happens, it happens here.
On Britain's Newsroom, weekdays from 9:30 a.m.
Only on GB News.
A Buckingham University report says that white Britons will be a minority by as soon as 2040. Now, that is a statistic that would have seemed completely unthinkable just a few years ago. Perhaps it's unthinkable to most people today. Now, this, of course, is all a result of immigration, generations that come afterwards, but also a collapse in the number of white British babies that are being born. But does it matter? Is it a problem? I'm joined down the line by Constantine Kissin, co-host of the very successful Trigonometry podcast. Constantine, welcome back on the programme. This is a pretty knockout statistic, isn't it?
Yes, it is, and we will see whether it manifests itself over time. These things are notoriously difficult to predict, of course, accurately. And, you know, whether the race of people matters as much, I think the reason people are concerned about this is what it shows is the country is changing very rapidly. And I think the reason people are thinking about it is that what it's really a proxy for is the concern that many of the people who've come, particularly in the recent wave under the last Tory government and under the previous Labour government, have not integrated. And so rather than becoming black British or Muslim British or everything else, they're not becoming British at all. They're simply living parallel lives in our country. And part of the reason for that is, of course, that it's very difficult to integrate people when the numbers are such. I often talk about the fact that more people came into Britain under the Blair government that had come between the Battle of Hastings in 1950. And then, of course, viewers of your programme don't need me to remind them that more people even than that came under the Tory government after that. So I think the reason this report is of concern is not so much of the racial dimension, but rather because of the fact that we simply realise that the country is changing very rapidly and not to many people's liking.
Constantine, isn't it true to say that the lack of integration is more down to religion than race?
Religion and culture, I would think. I think culture is a very important aspect of this as well. But I think the point is important, Nigel, that I think we could integrate people from very different cultures and very different religions, provided that they were coming in very small numbers. Over time, they were geographically dispersed and were encouraged to integrate. I think we've had and continue to have to this day the very opposite on all of those fronts. We have this great mantra of multiculturalism, which essentially says that every culture matters except the culture of this country. And we shouldn't encourage people to join it. Rather, we should celebrate the otherness of the different communities that we have and bang on constantly about the this community and the that community, instead of talking about actually what unites us. Now, combine that with geographical isolation in many of these communities that are living in very specific parts of the country and not mixing with the rest of the population, and the fact that the numbers are such that I don't think there's any hope we could integrate them with the best will in the world. So you put those three things together, you've got a very bad mix of things happening.
You have. Constantine, absolute pleasure to have you on the programme. Well, who better to ask than Kwasi?
Sure. I mean,
it is quite a sort of, it does sort of hit you a bit, doesn't it?
Yeah, my view on this, and obviously the son of immigrants, my parents came in the 60s, and I'm much more focused on culture than race. And obviously the two can collide. But I think if you come to the country, you've got to accept the broad values of the country that you're coming to.
Which so many that came during the Conservative years haven't.
Well, they did before in the Conservative years.
Well, not the last 14 years.
14 years has been very different. But I think, if you look at any list of British values, equality under the law, the rule of law, respect for women,
equality for women,
or equality for women, racial tolerance. Because a lot of these immigrant communities are more bigoted than anyone you could imagine. So I think that's the biggest threat, is one to broad British culture that we've all grown up with. And I think that's a serious thing to take into account. And I think if it means being more restrictive on immigration, which I hate to say we failed to do when I was in government, then that's what we should do.
Underestimate.
No, I'd put my hand up and say we completely messed that up.
Lloyd, does this scenario worry you?
Look, not particularly. I mean, I think every now and again you hear reports of redheads are going to die out in the next 40 years because it's a recessive gene, and then when you look into it in a bit more detail,
they keep coming.
a bit more detail, and it never really happens. And I kind of feel like it will happen. I mean, my grandmother was German. She came over in the 1940s, straight after the war. As soon as they got liberated, her brothers had been killed, and she came straight to Britain with her sister. And my dad is as British. He would never describe himself as German. He would describe himself as British.
But that's the culture. That's the point I'm making about culture.
I agree. So I agree.
That's the key about
I agree with you. But I do think most of the European immigration, even under the Blair years, after a generation or two, integrate relatively completely.
No,
I think they do.
I think when it
Polish
comes,
Christians. I think let's be honest. After a generation or two, they do.
However, Lloyd,
different religions that are not Christian is more difficult.
This report talks about colour.
Yeah, well,
it does. It's very frank.
I'm asking you about that.
And Britain has some of the highest rates, and I think this is great, of interracial marriage, where actually you have blended families. And what this report talks about actually is white British. And what you're seeing is people will say, well, I'm white Irish, or I'm white British and white French, or white Italian. And so I think that is... So I do think this report is deliberately designed to scaremonger around race, when the reality is not about race. Of course, there are issues around culture, and where I agree is I think we've spent too much time in, and this is the problem with the version of multiculturalism that we had. We spent too much time saying we want to celebrate the differences, and to get status, you have to talk about difference.
And that was New Labour.
I get you.
That was New Labour. That was the Mandelson.
Rather than to get status, we want to talk about commonality. Now, commonality doesn't mean complete assimilation, but commonality is, OK, you like eating this food, we like eating that food. Isn't it all food? Let's celebrate all different kinds of food. It's not about saying keep your... And the worst thing that we've got to... The worst...
Come on, give me a chart.
The worst thing...
You just go on and on.
I'm going to agree with you. The worst thing is when we have this idea of cultural appropriation being wrong. Actually, cultural... We should be appropriating all cultures in a broad...
Very quickly. Yes, this is about colour, but we all know that... the report's about colour, but we all know that the underlying issue is about assimilation and cultural identity. And that's where the big struggle is about. And I'm afraid that a lot of the people who are coming from Africa and Asia do not share the values that we've had for hundreds of years.
Or a shared history. That's the big issue. That's what we talk about.
I think they did.
Well, some do. But
I think they did. But I think if you look at the Gold Coast, Ghana, which is where I'm from, they did. But Somalia, perhaps less so.
Yeah.
Because they've got the religion.
Well, I think that's right. I think one of the things we haven't dared talk about over the years is the fact that actually there are certain people from certain countries who are more likely to integrate them from others, and we've been shying away from this debate.
We can't talk about
that. Scared.
But we need to put resources in to support the integration.
I'm drawing stumps on this. What we need to do is actually have fewer people coming into the country rather than spending more money on it. Now, always a pleasure. Next up, we have Professor Matt Goodwin.
State of the Nation, we've got a fiery debate about the rape gangs tonight. You've got lots of journalists out there trying to downplay what is really the reality when it comes to who is and who is not committing the rape gangs. A big BBC Newsnight scandal this week. We're going to be dissecting that. We've got Seb Gorka from Team Trump joining us on the show to talk about the BBC Gaza dispute. And we've got a top expert running us through the numbers on what British taxpayers are really paying when it comes to this escalating border crisis.
There we are. That is coming up next on State of the Nation with Matt. I'll be listening in the car. I hope you'll be watching at home. I'll be back with you tomorrow evening, live here on GB News at 7 o'clock.
There will be a light breeze in the morning, leading to a warm front. Boxed heat pumps, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hello there, good evening. Welcome to your GB News weather update from the Met Office. As we head into tomorrow, it's going to be quite a wet start for many areas, turning a little brighter into the afternoon, though we can't rule out a risk of some blustery showers. The reason for all the unsettled weather? Well, it's all thanks to low pressure situated to the north and at times this evening dragging in longer spells of rain across from the southwest. For a time, any showers easing away this evening, but soon being replaced by further outbreaks of rain, all moving through from the west, leading to a very wet start across Northern Ireland, most of England and Wales, but a few more clearer skies across parts of Scotland. Away from the northwest, though, plenty of showers moving through here. But with all the cloud and rain, it's set to be a rather mild start to Thursday. But for the morning commute, it is going to be fairly wet. Now, winds should be quite light, though we could still see some quite heavy outbreaks of rain, particularly across any high ground as this area of rain sweeps its way eastwards, eventually clearing the far east of Northern Ireland, then pushing back into northern parts of England. A little drier and brighter across parts of Scotland, but still plenty of showers across the northwest. The odd one or two heavy, and it could still be quite breezy around exposed coasts of Scotland. And Thursday is set to be quite an unsettled day. outbreaks of rain shifting their way eastwards, still rather heavy at times. Brightening up a little more into the afternoon, but still once again a risk of showers. Still breezy around coastal areas, and the odd shower turning quite heavy, may even hear the odd rumble of thunder. And still once again plenty of showers skirting the way across Scotland, where it will feel a little fresher, but elsewhere temperatures remaining in the mid to high teens. Friday once again brings more unsettled weather, showers, longer spells of rain and still quite breezy, particularly across the southwest or where we see any heavier outbreaks of rain, but potentially once again turning a little brighter for England and Wales as we head into the afternoon. Further spells of rain on Saturday, though a drier day ahead on Sunday with temperatures remaining fairly similar.
There will be a light breeze in the morning, leading to a warm front. Boxed heat pumps, sponsors of weather on GB News.
It's the final week to see how you could be our biggest winner yet, touring in this stylish Elnag Baron 560 motorhome. This brand new 2025 model comes complete with kitchen and bathroom areas and enough space to comfortably sleep a family of 4. We'll also give you a further £5,000 in tax-free cash to add a few of your favourite things. Don't miss out as lines close on the 6th of June. For another chance to win the lot, text WIN to 63225. One entry costs £2.50 plus one standard network rate message, or text BONUS to 63225. 5 entries cost £5 plus one standard network rate message. Go to gbnews.com/win. Entries start at £2.50. Call